trust your gut instinct. It's going to lead you in the right direction. So we're just going to be praying for you. So my mom says she's fine, but in your gut, you know she's really not. And that's what this episode is all about. We're going to talk about that feeling that when you walk away from mom or dad's house, or you're with your loved one, you just feel like there's something going on when you're not around. You have to trust your gut instinct. So I know, Melinda, you've dealt with that a lot yourself.
Well, just being 92, 93, she'll be 93 actually in October. She's still 92. And there's this it kind of hangs over your head all the time. Is she really okay? Because this is my dad was the same way. He'd go into the doctor's office even, and the doctor would be like, "How's things?" "Oh, I'm great. I'm good." That they want to put on this happy face, this "I'm strong, everything's all right." But because this happened in the emergency room. We took mom to the emergency room, and the doctor and the nurse is taking her in. She said, "Well, why are we here today, Miss Dixie?" And she goes, "I'm just fine." I'm like, "Why are we here?" And then I start chiming in. She fell, she's lightheaded, she's probably dehydrated, she's this, that, and the other. And they're like, okay, we'll start with. But that instinct of theirs to pretend everything's okay, I think is kind of a natural thing. And especially as they age, they don't want to admit that things are changing. So there's that little piece of me that was looking for some sort of a solution to help me. Was it to bring in a caregiver for a couple hours a day? Call her a certain time every day? What was that thing? And for me, one of the things that gives me relief from being there all the time, because as much as I love my mom, she's not moving in with me. She's just not. It's not happening. It would ruin my marriage. I just can't do that. So you actually have a product, Tina, that I'm going to tout a little bit now, if it's okay. It's working for me. Hey, go for it, girl. It's called Peace of Mind. And we can actually insert a little video, because I did a little video which shows this it looks almost like a router for your Wi-Fi in your house. It's just very simple. And then there's a little, I call it the motherboard or the home base. And so it's getting these symbols. And what it does is, so Miss Dixie gets up normally, let's say every morning about 6:30, and she takes a pain pill and she goes back to bed. And about 10 o'clock, she gets up. And this is when some upsetments kind of happen. She's moving to and from the bathroom. She's having some bathroom issues. She's gone back and forth a lot of times. This little device called Peace of Mind actually records the patterns of her. So over time, we know what's normal. We know what it looks like. For her to have these upsetments or this traffic back and forth, to the bathroom 6 times is not that unusual for her. She's been doing that a lot. Now, should she be going to the bathroom 6 times in the morning? That's another question for the doctor. But it's at least identifying some issues of what's going on. If she fell, it would identify ow! It would record that, it would monitor that, and it would let the home office know, looks like Dixie may have had a fall. You might want to get somebody to go check on her. So for me, to have that little bit of awareness in her living space 24/7 is such a relief.
Yeah. It's just such a safeguard, because it really allows the families to just breathe a little bit, because it's picking up. And some people have asked me, well, is it HIPAA compliant? It is HIPAA compliant. It erases everything that is not specific to a senior having. And I don't want to go into all the details for it, and I'll share the link to the website down below. But it's those patterns, and it's just what you described, whether it's a cognizant pattern, it's their activity pattern, their health patterns. There's so many things that it's monitoring. And, we've had many conversations. Hey, Melinda, blah, blah, blah. This is going on with your mom. And okay, that's good to know, right? And then you can formulate your plan. And what I find, though, is when I'm talking to families, what I see often, it's, again, they wait until there's a crisis. Mom's fallen, or she's broken a hip, or suddenly she is in the hospital and she's so confused, they can't figure it out. And the reality is that most people, there have been signs along the way. And if we're being real, all of us as sons and daughters and even loved ones, we kind of ignore the signs because we don't want them to be real. And so when our parent says they're okay, we just want to believe them because we want them to be okay. But there's often warning signs that actually lead up to those falls, that leads up to the medical crisis that they're in. And that's what you're preventing, is not knowing those subtle things. And, you know, I think if we're all transparent, we would say, you know what? I knew something was off, but nobody was saying anything. I just had a daughter tell me the other day, mom and dad keep telling me they're fine, but I just had this gut feeling. And dad wouldn't tell me that mom hadn't been feeling good because he didn't want to worry me. He knows I've got kids and got to, even was sharing, her husband and her were having issues. And so the last thing he wanted to do was worry her. But now mom is in the hospital and not doing well at all. And she's like, I just knew something was off. And so now we're providing a caregiver, but yet had she known, she could have, done something. So I really encourage people. One of the key things is something feels off. You know that you got to follow your gut instinct on that. And
Right.
so,
So, I mean, back to this peace of mind product, I think that this idea that the patterns are being traced. So, when something changes, I get this report like every other week. And when something changes, I could take in a couple reports because I'm doing mom's annual with her doctor now. And
yeah,
and it will give me something to say, like, look at this. This is the changes that we're seeing. Should she be going to the bathroom 6 or 7 times in the morning? Should she, blah, blah, blah. Like I could start to show her documentation of what's actually
absolutely.
going on, which I think will help her prescribe better care, for mom. She might say, she needs a probiotic. Her system just seems to be off. We need to get that gut healthy. If we can get that gut healthy, then the diarrhea and the constipation and like the combination of the two is going to soften and subside over time. But if the doctor doesn't have the right information, then they don't really know. And a lot of times mom will be like, I'm fine. Everything's good. And since she doesn't live with me, I need some help so that I can report this information to the doctor so that mom gets the best help possible to avoid the crisis. What you're saying. We want to
Absolutely.
avoid the crisis if we can.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Well, one of the things that often we do, and families do it all the time, right, is they just mistake normal aging they mistake the changes, the subtle changes for normal aging, right? They just want to believe that mom's okay. So this just must be part of normal aging. And so they miss those gradual changes because they're not with them. And suddenly they're in the crisis. And so the AI does help you like catch those gradual changes because it knows what the norm is. It knows what the normal behavior for this individual is. So it helps them to identify that.
So I have a friend, and I was meeting with her, and she was kind of lamenting a personal situation where she's noticing changes with her husband. And it's the noticing that I think we're trying to point out. Because
Absolutely.
then I got kind of nervous. And so I went online and I started researching, and it said, well, it could be signs of dementia. It could be signs of depression. It could be signs of this. Let's look at all those things. And then maybe you need to get a cognitive test. Maybe you need to get a blood test to see if there's something happening hormonally or, whatever. It's the paying attention part that we're talking about because it's so easy just to go like, he's turning into a crab or he's turning into a la la la, whatever. And maybe there is a mental or physical, biological, physiological, whatever the right word is, reason for this change in
Absolutely.
behavior, right?
Absolutely. Well, and especially if you think about families that go to see their parent once a week and they have these brief
Or once a
visits
month
or
or
once a
once a
month or
year.
yeah, for many, especially because we're in South Florida, there's a lot of family members that live up north and their family, their mom or dad are down here. They retired here. And so they don't see him very often. So they really don't know what's going on. And so they come down and they're visiting with them and all seems okay, but they're just not sure, right? And so they're missing that mom missed her medications. They're missing that mom had, you know, fallen because she didn't tell you they're missing that, "Oh, she missed her doctor's appointment twice last month. They had to call her and reschedule because mom missed it." And so that's one of the key indicators too is all these things that mom forgets, but that it will pick that up so you're able to know some of those indicators that you wouldn't otherwise know.
Right, right.
So
So let me ask you a question that we were talking about the peace of mind product that's an AI thing, but you also provide caregivers. Do they report into you and say, I'm seeing some changes? The family needs to
absolutely.
reach out and be in touch because that's key.
Absolutely. Every day that they work, they share information about what's going on with that individual. So if there's anything that's off, they share it. If there's anything they feel like needs more evaluation, they share it with me. And then or we have another RN as well, and they will share that with her and say, Miss So and so, I noticed that she's just a little more confused today than she normally is. And then we can also look at her patterns with the AI system. Has she gotten up 2 or 3 times during the night? And she normally doesn't do that. It tells us that, well, and she's confused. We need to get a urine sample from her because likely she has a urinary tract infection, which is what causes a lot of our seniors to end up in the hospital or to end up falling because they get so disoriented that they get confused and end up having to fall many times secondary to a urinary tract infection. It's a huge thing for them as seniors. So it helps us learn that as well. Their urinary patterns, their sleep patterns. So there's a lot that we're able to see, which is really helpful.
So my brother-in-law, I believe he had a UTI, a very serious UTI. He got up in the middle of the night, was disoriented. He went into his closet rather than into the bathroom and passed out. And because there was no monitoring system or anything like this, and he wasn't the greatest about staying in touch with us, 3 days later, we still hadn't heard from him, not on his phone, not on his computer, not no email, no texting, no anything. We're like, this is scary. So we ended up doing a wellness check, and the wellness check, the police go in and they found him. They kind of revived him a little bit, enough to say, Mr. Foster, Mr. Foster, and he go, oh. So he was semi-conscious. They take him to the emergency room. His kidneys had shut down. So
Wow.
he had whatever uric acid going through his brain and everything. And I truly believe that if this product was available at that time, if he had it in his house at the time, he would still be alive. Truly,
Absolutely.
truly, yeah. That's
Yeah,
so
that
great.
is.
I miss him. He was so great. He was so great with mom. He was so sweet, and he's definitely missed. I could cry if I let myself, but I won't.
I'm sorry. I know that's so hard. Well, and those are the things, right, that we don't realize that uric acid is what makes them almost crazy. I remember my mom one time when she had one, I thought she'd OD'd on her medication. And I just knew that, Mom, you've got to quit taking that. That's like making you loony. And it wasn't. It was a urinary tract infection that had caused her, she was very sick. And you just don't realize how much that uric acid affects their brain, which then when they get so confused, they're falling, they're weak, and if they become septic, it's really hard to bring them back from that. And it does cause permanent damage sometimes. So it's so important to catch it early. And oftentimes, one of the other things I see is that, families do attribute it to a temporary cause, just like I described that I did, right? I was like, oh, it must just be she's just had surgery a few weeks ago. She must just have taken too many pain pills, and they just don't want to face reality that there's something going on. Here we are months later, it hasn't gone away. And so, unfortunately, when you're talking about your UTI specifically, they end up many times passing because of those kinds of things, or a major fall because of it with head injuries or, broken bones and those kind of things. And you're scrambling in the hospital to help them and everyone's flying in. They don't know if they're going to survive. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And it's just so unnecessary.
Right, right, right. But this product wasn't available then.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
new. It's new. It's like, and anybody who's used AI, they know it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
scary amazing, And it's like,
Well, it's
whoa.
actually what's interesting is it's been around for 6 years technically.
Oh,
So
wow.
before the big fad of AI, they were already working with care companies around the country to really learn the patterns of seniors. And so it's amazing how much they've perfected it. It's really, really pretty amazing. So I'll put the link down below for those who are interested. But something else that I think families should think about too, Melinda, is that when you're looking at all of these things, you have to have one person when you're dealing with especially your parents, right? You have to have that one person that's specifically responsible. Like, you are for your mom, I am for my mom. If these things start happening, what are we going to do? Again, going back to the early conversations, but having that one point person that can make those decisions. And if they're getting the reports, whether it's from RAI or whether it's from a caregiver, or they're stopping in every day to check on their parents, then being able to be responsible to get, a plan of action in place, because oftentimes what we see at the end of the day is medical care is very reactive versus being proactive. So
Right.
we've got to be more proactive where our parents are concerned, because otherwise they end up in a mess. And
Right.
for lack of a better word, they're
Yeah.
end up with that crisis that we keep talking about. And so, simple things that you can do, from starting a log, like a lot of our caregivers, because we're doing a log with our caregivers, or with the AI does a log, or if you don't have either of those, if you're the family member, make a log like, okay, mom was acting a little, off today, and describe what that look, and start tracking some of those behaviors, because those patterns, after a time, you'll start seeing, and you're able, just like you said, to take them into the doctor. You're able to, be more self-aware versus ignoring it, and then talking to the other family members about what you're seeing, because if they live out of town and they're not seeing what you see, having a log of, okay, it happened here, it happened here. Because oftentimes they'll dismiss it because they don't want to deal with it, or one family member actually told me this week, she said, Tina, I just kind of push her away because it's hard for me to deal with the thought of my mom not being my mom. I'm like,
Yeah.
ugh, I get it. Like, I get it.
I love the log idea. And one of the other things I'd like to add to your list, if I may, is make sure they're drinking a lot of water.
Absolutely.
I mean, my mom hate for some reason she wasn't raised drinking water. There's almost like this generational thing. There you are drinking. You're just such a good girl. And
The idea.
I think that like if we had a list, like keep a log, make sure that they're being really hydrated. I don't know how many glasses, depending on their height and weight and
Well,
everything.
they say that it's supposed to be half of your body weight. So if you weigh 135 pounds, you should have half of that in ounces. So say
Oh,
130,
you
it's
should have made
usually
it easier on yourself.
65 ounces a day.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot of glasses of water to really stay hydrated, but that is so key to because of this UTI is it's a big deal for seniors and
Yeah.
probably because they don't drink a lot of water. So, I mean, that would be my number 2 hint to add a tip to add onto your, your list. What would be
Definitely.
next?
Well, I would say also to make sure that you have a clear decision between the family members, so that you avoid sibling rivalry, to be honest, because what happens a lot is that you have a parent in crisis, and then all of a sudden there's the siblings, nobody agrees. So really having a clear conversation and plan of action with your family members to really establish who's going to check in on mom? How often are we each going to check in on her? Who's going to track like what's going on with her? Who's going to the doctors with her? And having those conversations, because if you plan ahead and you're not just reacting to the crisis, then you'll each start seeing some of the patterns. You may be able to avoid the crisis altogether by having a plan between the siblings.
We had a couple different senior elder law kind of experts, and there is a category in legally it's medical proxy, medical surrogate, medical. You probably know what I'm saying. Is like make sure somebody's in place to make the decisions legally.
100.
Because otherwise, something happens to mom or dad, and somebody's got to make the decision. You've got 4 siblings arguing about whether it's life support or this next procedure or that. And like, somebody's got to be in charge. And if it's done on paper and it's legally done, we'll put down a couple links to the things that you should have in place legally as your parents age, because otherwise then you're dealing with probate, then you're dealing with arguing with sibling rivalry or whatever it is. Somebody always wants to be in charge. They've never been to visit mom, but now all of a sudden they want to be the one to make the decision, right?
Absolutely. And we are actually going to have Adam Gumson. He is our next week's podcast. He is an attorney. He gives all of those types of items. So make sure you follow us. Make sure you stay tuned for next week to make sure you hear from him, because he gave some invaluable things. Like, One of the things I never thought of, making sure your parents' checking account that whoever's designated financially is the beneficiary. Who'd have thought to go into a checking account and make sure that the beneficiary
They
is
call it
set
a
up properly?
POD or a POD.
Yeah,
TOD, transfer on death. Different banks have different designations. We
yeah,
just did this, Hank and I just did this. We went through everything, and I thought I was all set and done, but I had this little account over here that I opened, and there was no beneficiary on it. And then you're in probate for years over a couple $1,000s.
yeah.
It's just
Well, and even if mom ends up in the hospital, if you're not on that account, then there's all these hoops you have to go through. So if you prepare in advance, again, proactive versus reactive, then it allows you to take care of what you need to take care of for mom when she is in the hospital or she's sick or what have you, or she has dementia. If she's progressing, then it allows you to do what you need to do versus having to go through all kinds of legal hoops when now she legally doesn't have the right mind to be able to do that for you. You've got to pay a ton of legal fees to get yourself there. So there's a lot to consider in that.
if you think you have it all covered, which I thought I did,
Yep.
just give yourself the time to go in and research it one more time. Make sure every designation is in place on every single account that you have, because you will save yourself untold hours of grief by doing it in advance.
Tune for next week for that with lots of great tools. And thank you for being with us. Don't forget to subscribe and share this with someone who you feel like could bring some value to. And I'll also have the link down below because we have a guy that goes more into depth to some of the things we talked about today. And if you're just feeling like there's something off, I just want to leave you with this. You're probably not wrong. Trust your gut instinct. It's going to lead you in the right direction. So we're just going to be praying for you that you'll know exactly what to do next. And we have lots of tools to help you get there. Thank you for joining us today. Subscribe and come back next week for more expert guidance, real support, and even a little laughter.